Hey friends, tonight we're heading back in time, not to the castles, the knights, or the tales of noble glory. No. Tonight we begin with blistered palms, burning lungs, and a forge that never sleeps. We're stepping into the soot-stained world of a medieval blacksmith. Not the slow-motion kind from the movies with heroic sparks and glowing swords, but the real kind. The kind who wakes before the roosters, stinks like smoke, and ends the day wondering if their hands are still attached. So before you get too cozy, make sure the lights are dimmed just right. Maybe put on a fan. You know, for that soft, soothing hum in the background. Get comfortable, but not too comfortable, because by the time this night is over, you'll be thankful you don't smell like iron and regret. And hey, if you find yourself enjoying this quiet little journey through history, go ahead and tap that subscribe button, only if you truly want to. And leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I always love seeing just how far this sleepy little forge of ours reaches. Alright, take a deep breath. Let the noise of the day fall away like cooling ash, and prepare to meet the man who quite literally held the medieval world together with fire, steel, and aching joints. Coming up in part 1. Born with blisters, a childhood spent in fire. You weren't born in a cradle. You were born next to a fire. Not a cozy fireplace with warm soup and lullabies. No, a forge. A blistering hot, always hungry, smoke-belching beast. Your lullaby was the wheeze of bellows and the clang of iron against endle. Your nursery? A dirt floor, coated in soot and scattered with nails. You didn't get soft baby blankets. You got burlap sacks stiff with ash. And when other toddlers were learning to chase butterflies or giggle at clouds, you were learning how not to trip headfirst into open flame. In your family, there was no such thing as a proper childhood. There was only work, and work in waiting. By the time you could stand upright without toppling into the fire pit, you were handed a broom and pointed toward the coal pile. By age 6, you were no longer a child. You were officially your father's apprentice, which in medieval blacksmith code meant tiny unpaid laborer with permanent charcoal streaks on your cheeks. Your day started before the sky remembered to turn blue. First task? Stoke the fire. Second? Don't die. Because the forge didn't care how small you were. It roared and smoked and hissed just the same. You could barely lift the bellows, but that didn't matter. You'd learn or burn. Other village kids? They got sticks and goats. You got tongs and tedium. Their playground was a field. Yours was a rack of iron tools, each sharper, heavier, and more judgmental than the last. Your toys included a hammer bigger than your arm, a bucket of coal that weighed more than you, and a nail that took 37 tries to get right, each mistake earning a grunt of disappointment from your father, which was somehow worse than yelling. The rules of childhood didn't apply to you. There was no skipping rope, no pet chickens, no naps, just tasks, always more tasks. And you were lucky if the job didn't leave a new burn scar or two. The games you played were different. There was, how long can you hold the iron before screaming? And the classic, guess which side of the hammer is hot? And, of course, hold the bellows until your arms turn to noodles. Fun? Well, depends on how you define it. You might have laughed once or twice, quietly, when no one was looking. But mostly, you learned that joy was a fleeting thing, usually crushed under the weight of a water bucket or the reek of scorched leather. Your father, the blacksmith, was not a cuddly man. He didn't tell bedtime stories. He told you to hit it harder. That was his mantra. Hit it harder, sometimes followed by, "Why are you crying? It's just a little burn." His hands were slabs of bark, knotted and cracked. His voice was smoke wrapped in gravel. He wasn't cruel, not really. He was just tired, always tired. Tired from work, tired from life, tired of tax collectors and knights who wanted miracles by dinner time. And yet, in the dim glow of the forge, you studied him like scripture. How he angled the iron. How he knew when the flame was ready. How he didn't flinch when a spark kissed his neck. You didn't ask questions. You didn't dare. You just watched, mimicked, and obeyed. Because questions got you a thrown horseshoe. And silence earned you, well, more silence. There were no weekends. No holidays. The forge didn't believe in saints' days or breaks. It ate coal, it ate time, and it ate childhood. Someone always needed something mended or made. And if they didn't, your father invented work anyway. You learned early that rest was not a thing. Rest was suspicious. Rest meant you weren't pulling your weight. So you kept moving, kept hauling, kept hammering, even when your arms trembled like reeds in the wind. Your payment? A crust of bread, maybe. A grunt of approval, if you were very lucky. And sleep. Well, sometimes. On the floor. Next to the anvil. Still in your apron. By the time you were 10, you no longer noticed the heat. Your nose stopped registering the stink of burning hair. Your palms were a permanent map of calluses. You weren't a child. You were a tool. A soot-covered, silent, necessary cog in a machine of fire and iron. And when other boys started dreaming of swords and adventures, you dreamt of nails. Thousands of them. Bent, crooked, reheated and hammered straight until they were good enough for a chicken coop. This was your world now. Welcome to the family business. Hope you like sweat, smoke, and 70 years of back pain. Coming up in part 2. The anvil is my bed, growing up in the shadow of the forge. You never asked for this life. It was assigned to you, somewhere between your first breath and your first burn. By the time you could carry a bucket without spilling it, or yourself, you were drafted. Into what exactly? Not an army. Worse. A lineage. A sacred, soot street chain stretching back generations. The family forge. Passed down like a curse with a leather apron and a hammer that never felt quite yours. This place wasn't just a workshop. It was a world. Your world. 4 walls made of stone and smoke, a ceiling that creaked when the wind was wrong, and a dirt floor that swallowed your footsteps. The forge wasn't a corner of the shop. It was the heart of it. And it had moods. Some days it roared like a beast, demanding coal and blood. Other days it sulked, stubborn and slow, needing coaxing like an old meal. You learned to read it better than you read anything else. Because no one ever taught you letters. But you could read heat like scripture. The coals whispered to you. The iron his secrets in your ear. The hammer had a rhythm, and soon, your arms followed it without question. Your body became fluent in the language of work. Swing, lift, brace, turn, wipe, repeat. There were no lessons. Just mistakes. And scars. Your education was trial by flame, and the curriculum never ended. You didn't grow up. You thickened. Like old leather. Your muscles came not from sport, but from repetition. Not from lifting swords, but hauling barrels. You never played. You practiced survival. Other boys had voices still sweet with youth. Yours dropped early, gravel-ace from smoke and grunts. By the time they were learning to float, you were learning how to shoe a horse that didn't want to be shoed. You didn't get a bed. You got a corner. A sack stuffed with straw, wedged between the bellows and a pile of half-finished horseshoes. It smelled like everything you couldn't wash off: sweat, grease, fire, and the faint sting of regret. But it was home. And the handle? It became your headboard. Warm on some nights, unforgiving on others. You got used to waking sore. You stopped expecting otherwise. And rest, real rest, was a myth. Even sleep didn't come easy. Your body twitched with phantom swings. Your hands clenched invisible tools. You'd wake to the sound of your own teeth grinding, thinking you forgot to quench the blade. There was no silence. Not really. Even when the forge went dark, the noise lived in you. The clang of hammer, the wheeze of bellows, the crackle of coals. Your ears rang like they were still in session. You stopped noticing the burns, not because they hurt less, but because pain became background noise, a second heartbeat, a companion. You didn't own much. No books, no ornaments, just tools. Rusting, dented, irreplaceable tools. They were more than objects. They were limbs. If one broke, it was like losing a finger. The apron you wore? More patched than leather. Scorched, stiff, and heavy. It didn't protect you so much as remind you of every time it failed to. But you wore it anyway. Because identity, it turns out, is a combination of what hurts you and what you hold on to. And the forge, it held everything. Your father's silence, your childhood's end, your future's shape. Because that fire, that endless, burning fire, wasn't just fuel. It was inheritance. Coming up in part 3. Bend or break, the cost of becoming useful. By your early teens, you weren't just helping at the forge. You were part of it. An extension of fire and steel. Not a child. Not even quite a person some days. Just a set of hands, a pair of shoulders, and a spine willing to bend until it forgot how to straighten. They said you were becoming useful, as if usefulness was the reward for losing every other part of yourself. Your back began to curve, ever so slightly, like a hook pulled by years of leaning too far forward. Your arms? Stronger than most grown men's, but always sore. Always buzzing with an ache that never quite left. You were no longer lifting the hammer. It was lifting you, dragging you along for the ride. Whether you were ready or not, your skin didn't feel like skin anymore. It was more like armor. Scorched, cracked, layered with soot that no soap could touch. You could scrub until your hands bled and still look like you bathed in smoke. And your hands, let's talk about them. Once, they were small and curious. They pointed. They touched. They reached for the sky. Now they were tools. Blunt, bruised, trembling in the morning cold. Fingernails blackened or gone altogether. Knuckles swollen like they'd been in a tavern brawl with gravity itself. You dropped things. A lot. Not because you were clumsy, but because your fingers no longer remembered how to be gentle. Grip strength? Impressive. Dexterity? A fading memory. You could crush walnuts barehanded, but lacing your boots took 15 minutes and a prayer. The forge didn't care. It never asked how you were doing. It never offered a break. It only roared and hissed and reminded you. Every single day. That usefulness came with a price. The price was your body. And your mind. You stopped dreaming. Or maybe you just forgot how. Sleep was no longer a refuge. It was a flicker of unconsciousness between shifts. You tried to sit once. Really sit. To be still and do nothing. But your body didn't know how. Your legs twitched. Your shoulders rolled. Your brain kept hammering. Even in silence you heard the forge. Even in silence you felt it calling. And so you rose again, picked up the tongs, grunted through the ache, and got back to work. Because by now you understood the truth. In this life you didn't get to rest. You got to be useful. And if you bent, at least you hadn't broken. Not yet. Coming up in part 4. The forge owns you when work becomes identity. At first, you thought you were learning a trade, a craft, a skill, something to pass the time, something to pass down. But somewhere along the way, the forge stopped being a place and started being you. You didn't just work at the forge. You lived there. You breathed it. It became the rhythm of your day, the scent in your hair, the reason your joints clicked when you turned too fast. It seeped into you, not just into your clothes. Those were long lost to smoke and oil, but into your bones, into your memory. You started measuring time not by seasons or feasts, but by orders, by the weight of iron waiting by the door. You stopped asking, "What day is it?" Instead, you asked, "How many hinges left before dusk?" And slowly, imperceptibly, you became the forge. You learned its moods, its tantrums, its moments of stillness so rare they felt like a gift. You knew which coals burned hardest, which tools bit back when mishandled, which parts of the floor creaked like warning whispers when stepped on wrong. The hiss of quenching iron, the clang of hammer on steel. They stopped sounding like noise. They became music. Rough, relentless, repetitive, but music nonetheless. A brutal, metallic lullaby. The forge didn't clock out. It didn't take Sundays. And neither did you. If the fire died, you panicked. Not because of the lost work, but because of the silence. Silence became the stranger. Too heavy, too still, too loud in its own way. So you fed the fire. Even when your arms shook. Even when your breath caught in your throat. Even when the smoke felt like it was trying to crawl inside your chest and stay there forever. Because without the forge, who were you? The village knew your name. Kind of. More like they knew your presence. "He's probably at the forge," they'd say. And they were right. You were always there. You became the answer to everyone's problem. A hinge that squeaked. A gate that leaned. A sword that chipped. And still, you weren't a person to them. You were a solution. They didn't see the way your hands shook after 12 hours of swinging. They didn't notice the burns you'd hidden beneath your sleeves. They didn't ask if you'd eaten or slept, or if your left shoulder had started making that terrible grinding noise again. They just needed something fixed. And you fixed it. You kept your head down. You kept the fire stoked. And you told yourself it was enough. To be needed. To be necessary. Because in the medieval world, that was the closest thing to meaning. You weren't a knight. You weren't a priest. You weren't a landowner or a scholar. But you made the nails that held their roofs up. The plows that broke their fields. The locks on their doors. The swords in their scabbards. You weren't celebrated. But you were central. And in a strange, tired, smoky way. That felt like purpose. Coming up in part 5. Smoke in the lungs, fire in the bones, the toll of every breath. In most jobs, smoke is a problem. In yours, it's a roommate. A loud, smothering, never paying any rent kind of roommate. It doesn't knock. It doesn't ask. It just moves in. Into your lungs, your clothes, your skin, and stays there. The forge was never designed for fresh air. There were no chimneys. Just a hole in the roof. A hole that let more rain in and smoke out. There were no windows. Just soot-covered walls, a fire that never slept. And your father's cough echoing like a warning from the future. Every breath came pre-seasoned. With coal dust, scorched iron, burnt leather, and a sprinkle of regret. You learned early that if you could see more than 6 feet ahead of you, something was wrong. Probably the fire had gone out. Or someone left the door open. Which meant a draft. Which meant sparks in your eyes. Which meant pain. Your lungs protested at first. They burned. They itched. They filled with black phlegm you try not to think too much about. But then one day, they stopped complaining. Not because it got better. Because they gave up. Like soldiers in a war they knew they weren't winning. Coughing fits became part of your rhythm. Swing. Step. Cough. Quench. Cough. Breathe shallow. Swing again. You stopped noticing how strange it was to struggle for air. What was strange was not struggling. Even your voice changed. Raspy. Cracked. A gravel-strewn whisper. You sounded like a goat herder who'd gargled with smoke. Every word scratched on the way out. Every laugh came with a wheeze. You started avoiding talking unless it was necessary. And even then, most conversations were grunts and nods. There was no escape from it. The smoke wasn't just in the room. It was in you. You carried it like a second skin. It sat in the folds of your clothes. It clung to your hair. It followed you into the tavern, where people gave you that look. The one that said, "Here comes the smoke again." And moved one seat over, just to breathe. You tried wrapping a cloth around your mouth. Sometimes it helped. Mostly it just made you sweat more. And smelled worse. Like wet wool soaked in forged grease. The cloth didn't block the dust. It just muffled your curses when you inhaled it. And yet, you kept working. Because in your world, air wasn't for breathing. It was for enduring. Clean air felt suspicious. Fresh air made you twitch. Silence made you anxious. You needed the hiss, the crackle, the sting, even as it carved lines in your lungs you couldn't see. Asthma? You had it probably. So did your father. So will your son. But no one used the word. They just called it forged lungs, as if naming the damage made it honorable. You coughed until your ribs ached. You coughed until your sides went numb. And still, the hammer never stopped swinging. Because iron doesn't wait. And the fire? It demands more than just sweat. It demands breath. Coming up in part 6. The tools that love you back, and bite you anyway. By now, your hands know the weight of every tool like they know the shape of your own bones. They don't just hold the hammer. They remember it. Not because it's comforting, but because it's always there. Like gravity. Or taxes. Or that one villager who always wants a sword fixed. Real quick. Your hammer isn't just a tool. It's an extension of your will. You've swung it more times than you've slept. You've cursed it more often than you've eaten. You've named it. Or maybe it named itself. Either way, it clicks when you lift it, like a haunted maraca. That's your shoulder, by the way. It started doing that last winter and never stopped. But without the hammer, you're just a sweaty man standing in a smoky box. With it, you're a blacksmith, a creator, a bruised-handed miracle worker. Or so people say, right before handing you something broken and asking, "Can you fix it by sundown?" Then there are the tongs. Ah, yes. The tongs. Theoretically helpful. In reality? Hot, clumsy, traitorous fingers made of iron and spite. You pick something up. It slips. You adjust. It burns you. You yell. Your father grunts in judgment from across the room. They pinch when they're not supposed to. They stick when you need them to release. And somehow, they always wait until you're holding something glowing orange to rebel. Your dad says, "Grip it like you mean it." But you do. You always mean it. And they still betray you. Your chisel? It used to be sharp. Now it's more of a suggestion, a vague idea of an edge. You've used it to carve, pry, scrape, and once, during a particularly stubborn winter, to break open a frozen latrine lid. The rest of your tool bench looks like a torture museum curated by exhaustion. Files, punches, rivet sets. Every one of them has taken a bit of your blood. None have ever said sorry. You've been stabbed, jabbed, crushed, scorched, poked, and flung across the room by tools you yourself maintained. And still, you care for them like their kin. You weld them. You hang them up just right. You sharpen their tired edges and whisper apologies when you drop them. Because if a tool breaks, you don't work. And if you don't work, you don't eat. Your apron? Technically, it's meant to protect you. Practically, it serves as a leather sponge for everything hot and sharp. It stiffens in winter like a corpse. In summer, it smells like boiled regret. There's a hole near your hip where a shard burned through 3 years ago. You keep meaning to patch it. You never do. And yet, despite it all, despite the burns, the cuts, the curses, these tools are your lifeline. They don't love you. They don't care. But they stay. And in a world where everything breaks eventually, that's almost enough. Coming up in part 7. Everyone needs you. No one thanks you. The curse of being essential. You don't wear a crown. You don't preach sermons. You don't ride into town with a sword on your hip and a banner behind your back. But without you, the village would fall apart before the next full moon. You're the blacksmith. And that means you are everything. Quietly. Invisibly. Constantly. Your tech support, roadside assistance, emergency services, and last-minute salvation all rolled into one smoke-smeared figure who hasn't had a decent meal in 2 days. When a knight breaks his blade in practice, he calls for you. When a farmer's plow splits midfield, he's knocking on your door. When the baker's oven won't close or the bell won't ring at the church, guess who they send for? Not the priest. Not the noble. You. Always you. They show up uninvited, mid-swing, shoes caked in mud and breathless with urgency. I know you're busy, but could you just... That phrase. The eternal curse. Could you just fix this door hinge? Could you just reshape this horseshoe? Could you just... They speak like you've been waiting all day for their problem. As if the iron in your hands wasn't already glowing red. As if your list of unfinished repairs wasn't long enough to wrap around the forge 3 times. And when you're done, when you stayed up late, worked through dinner, patched the broken thing they couldn't even name, they nod. Maybe. Sometimes they don't even do that. They just take it and leave. Like your work was inevitable. Like the blade repaired itself. You don't expect praise. But you notice the silence. When the knight returns victorious from battle, they sing songs. When the priest gives a good sermon, people bring bread and wine. When the miller fattens his goats, they clap and admire. But you get forgotten. Because your best work is invisible. Things that don't break. Doors that swing. Wheels that turn. They only notice you when something fails. When it creaks, groans, or snaps. That's when you matter. And payment? A gamble. Sometimes it's coins, mostly copper. Sometimes it's a loaf of hard bread, or a sack of onions. Sometimes, if they're feeling generous, You get a chicken. A dead one. Already half rotten. 4. Soup. You fix tools that didn't even belong to the people who brought them. Then daggers from bar fights. Axes chipped by people who definitely didn't buy them. Unidentifiable chunks of twisted metal passed to you with the phrase, "I don't know what this is, but can you make it work again?" You always try. Because this is the trade. The curse of being essential. They need you. Desperately. But they never say it out loud. And still, you work. Because in your bones, beneath the soot and the stiffness, you know something they don't. They would've lasted a week without you. Coming up in part 8. Peace is bad for business. When no war means no work. You'd think peace would be a blessing. No battles. No raiders. No screaming nobles demanding swords yesterday. A chance to rest. To breathe. To finally sleep through the night without imagining iron snapping in your dreams. But peace, for a blacksmith? It's a slow, quiet starvation. See, you might fix plows and hinges. But what really pays the bills is war. When work comes, it brings the heat. Not just to the forge. To your whole life. Suddenly you're needed. Urgently. Desperately. Night needs a new blade. The Lord needs a dozen helmets. The archers want arrows, by the hundreds. Everything sharp, everything fast. You don't sleep much. But your belly stays full. The alehouse forgets your tab. Even the tavern girl smiles when you walk in smelling like melted iron. The forge roars all day. And you, exhausted and aching, feel something strange. Purpose. But when peace arrives, it arrives like a whisper. And then takes your income with it. The war ends. The marching stops. And the noble, once frantic for weapons, now needs a cooking pot fixed. And can only pay in cabbages. You go from armorer to handyman. From creator of blades to mender of cracked pans. From master smith to bad guy who fixes doorknobs. And the worst part? People act like this is a good thing. "Isn't it lovely? No more fighting?" they say. You nod because what else can you do? You nod and smile while your fire burns lower. And your stomach stays empty longer. Sure, you could still make goods. Cauldrons, spits, keys, lantern hooks. But the coin's thinner. The trade colder. Everyone wants you to work like a wizard. But pay you like a stable boy. Try raising your prices. They look at you like you just insulted their grandmother. But you're just hammering metal, they say. As if the metal doesn't fight back. As if the burns and blisters hammer themselves. You start missing the chaos. Not the blood. Not the fear. Just the rush. The noise. The demand. The recognition. Back then, they waited outside your forge, coin in hand. Now, they drop off broken hinges and say, "I'll pay you next harvest." Spoiler, they won't. You patch up rusted latches. Rebend old nails. Sharpen hose that should have been retired 10 winters ago. You don't say it aloud. But some nights, as you stare at your dwindling coal pile, a whisper slips into your thoughts. A small skirmish wouldn't be so bad. Just a little one. Minor border dispute. Nothing too serious. Enough to crack a few swords. Enough to bring the knights back. And the coin with them. Because peace may be good for poets. But for the man who makes their pens and pot stands, peace is poverty in disguise. Coming up in part 9. The work that never ends, when one repair becomes 3 more. Some jobs have an end. A clear finish line. A task completed, a sigh of relief, maybe even a warm bowl of stew as a reward. Blacksmithing is not one of those jobs. In your world, there is no such thing as done. You fix one thing, and three more break. You patch a hinge, and the cartwheel falls off. You sharpen a scythe, and someone walks in holding a rake that looks like it's been used in battle. By chickens. The list is never finished. Not written. Not spoken. But it looms. A silent mountain of waiting metal. Every villager has something. And every one of them swears. It'll just take a minute. It never takes a minute. Not even once. They arrive, hopeful and impatient. This latch just needs a little fixing. You smile, tight-lipped, knowing that a little will eat your whole afternoon. You rise before the sun, because someone might need a door hinge fixed before market. You work through lunch, because no one tells you it's lunch. You collapse into bed long after night falls. And even then, your mind keeps swinging. You dream in sparks. You hear the hiss of hot iron in your sleep. Your hands twitch in the dark, still grasping for phantom tools. Rest doesn't come, only pause. You try to sit, but the moment your weight touches the stool, someone's at the door. A kid with a broken wheel, a monk with a bent bell, a shepherd asking if you have a minute. Even the quick jobs aren't quick. They unfold like riddles. Each twist of the tool reveals another issue. Every job comes with a story, and every story adds time. You don't keep a to-do list, because there's no done. There's only next. Your apprentice runs in, young, eager, too loud. The friar's horse through a shoe. Again. You wipe your hands already aching, and say nothing, because of course you'll do it. You always do. The forge doesn't close. Not really. Even if the fire goes out. Your body remembers. The work doesn't live in the tools. It lives in you. You eat between jobs. Bite, hammer, sip, hammer. Your stew goes cold. Your bread stiffens. Your tea forgets it was ever hot. You sleep in borrowed minutes. A nap stolen in a lull between clangs. Your dreams, when they come, smell like iron. And just when you think you've earned 5 quiet minutes, a knock. Always a knock. Because blacksmithing isn't a job. It's a cycle. Work. Fix. Repeat. Until your hammer falls from your hand. Or your hand forgets how to close around it. Coming up in part 10. When food is fuel and sleep is strategy. The vanishing comforts of life. You'd think. After all that swinging, hauling, hammering, and burning, at the very least, you'd get a good meal. Or maybe, just maybe, a proper night's sleep. You'd be wrong. In your world, food isn't pleasure. It's fuel. Nothing more. You eat to keep moving, to keep hammering, to keep from passing out. Breakfast? If you're lucky, a heel of yesterday's bread. Crust hard enough to break a tooth, but soft enough to chew if you dunk it in cold pottage. Lunch? More of the same, maybe with a slice of turnip if you're celebrating. Dinner? A bowl of stew so thin, you can see the bottom of the bowl through it. Meat? A memory. Something that happened once at a wedding. Maybe. You don't sit down to eat. You stand. One hand holding tongs. The other shielding your food from ash, sparks, and the occasional fly with too much ambition. Meals are fast. Conversation is a grunt. If someone knocks while you're chewing, you swallow too quickly and get back to work. Because stew can wait. Customers can't. You've learned to eat like a soldier on the front lines. Quietly. Efficiently. Without joy. Now sleep. Let's talk about sleep. Or what's left of it. You crawl into bed long after the fire has dimmed. Your hands still throb. Your back won't lie flat. Your ears ring with phantom hammer blows. Your fingers twitch as if they're still trying to hold tongs. Your bed is a straw-stuffed sack that squeaks with every movement. Too flat in the middle. Too lumpy at the edges. And always a little suspicious. You lie there, blinking at the ceiling, doing mental math. Did you finish the gate latch? Did you quench the blade fully? Did you remember to bill the monk for the cracked bell? He said he'd pay in candles. You hate candles. And just when sleep starts to arrive, just when your eyes begin to close, the door creaks. Someone's ox cart broke on the road. A noble's sword needs sharpening. A villager insists their door won't close. And it's urgent. Because obviously your rest is optional. So you rise. Again. Every muscle protests. But your feet move. Because they know the way by now. You survive on scraps. Half naps. Interrupted meals. And the kind of stubbornness that borders on religion. You've learned that food and sleep aren't rewards. They're intermissions. Brief pauses in a story that never ends. You'll eat when you can. Sleep when you're allowed. And hope the fire doesn't die. While you dream. Coming up in part 11. Hands like iron, hearts like flint. What the work does to your body. There was a time, long ago, when your hands were soft, small, curious, hands that reached for the sky, hands that could have played a lute, or stroked a dog, or held someone gently without flinching. That time is over. Your hands now? They are tools. Blunt, blistered, cracked like old bark, callous so deep they might as well be carved from stone. You don't feel heat the way others do, because your palms no longer remember what coolness feels like. They only know burn, pressure, and weight. Your fingers used to bend gracefully. Now they groan. Every knuckle clicks like a bad door hinge. And when it's cold, they seize up. Stiff. Slow. Trembling like you've aged 50 years overnight. Dexterity? Gone. You drop things. You fumble buttons. You lace your boots like a man solving a puzzle blindfolded. But you can lift. Oh, you can lift. You can crush walnuts like they insulted your mother. You can carry buckets heavier than your pride. You can swing a hammer all day and still lift it again tomorrow. That's the strange gift of the forge. It takes your flexibility and replaces it with force. You once crushed your thumb so badly it turned black for 2 weeks. You didn't stop working. You just switched hands and cursed more than usual. You've lost fingernails. Some cleanly. Others in ways that make you look away when you remember. Cuts are constant. Files bite you. Metal edges snap back when you least expect. You bleed at least once a week. Usually twice. And you don't even flinch anymore. Burns are worse. Not the little ones. The ones that sizzle. The ones that blister and bubble. The ones that leave a permanent lesson on your skin. You've branded yourself more times than you care to admit. At this point, you don't even get angry. You just nod. As if the fire was reminding you who's in charge. And then there's your back. It used to be straight. Now it curves slowly, subtly, like a question mark. Your spine sings in protest every morning. And your knees? They ache when you crouch. They complain when you climb. They whisper threats when you stand too low. But you still stand. Because the forge doesn't care. The work doesn't wait. And your heart? Well, that's changed too. It used to beat for joy. Now it beats for rhythm. for pace, for endurance. It's learned to ignore pain, push through fatigue, and keep going long after everything else in you says, stop. You've become the iron you shape. Hard, tempered, sometimes brittle, but always, always necessary. Coming up in pipe 12. You smell like smoke, the scent that never leaves. Let's be honest. You don't smell great. Actually, you haven't smelled clean since you were maybe 5, maybe. The day you became an apprentice. The day you stepped near the forge with bare hands and wide eyes was the last day your skin belonged to you. From then on, you've smelled like smoke, like fire, like metal, sweat, and something scorched that no one can quite identify. Bathing? In theory, it's possible. In practice, it's pointless. You wake up in soot. You work in soot. You breathe soot. So unless you plan to bathe every hour on the hour, and you don't have that kind of time or water, why bother? Besides, soap's expensive. Time is scarce. And cold water in winter feels like punishment. So you rinse your hands when you can. You splash your face in a bucket now and then. But mostly, you let the forge perfume you. Your tunic? It started as brown. Or maybe gray. It's hard to tell now. Because it's mostly char. The apron you wear every day has absorbed so much smoke. It probably qualifies as a fire hazard. You smell like desperation slow roasted over coals. Like leather dipped in sweat, then left to dry under the armpit of a dragon. Even your sweat has changed. It doesn't smell like effort. It smells like residence. Like it's lived in your skin too long and refuses to leave. People notice. Oh, they notice. In the tavern, you're given a seat near the window. Always. Not because it's scenic, but because the airflow helps everyone else survive the evening. When you walk in, the air changes. People shift. Some discreetly, some not. Bread goes stale faster around you. Cats hiss. Children wrinkle their noses and whisper. One time, a man walked past and muttered, "Smells like war in here." But the strangest part? You've stopped noticing. It's not that you don't care. It's just, the smoke has become you. It's in your hair, your clothes, your skin. Your bed smells like it. Your pillow exhales it. Even your dreams carry it. You've tried using herbs. A sprig of lavender tucked inside your collar. Didn't last an hour. The forge burned right through it. Now it just smells like roasted flowers. Perfume? Laughable. It's like whispering into a thunderstorm. But here's the thing. In a strange, smoky way, you're proud of it. That smell means you worked. That you forged. That you endured. It means you shaped something today. Bent iron to your will. Tamed fire for just long enough to make it useful. So no, you don't smell great. But you smell real. And in your world, that's enough. Coming up in part 13. The sun at the bellows, passing down the fire. You didn't choose this life. The forge chose you. Through your father's calloused hands, and the silence he passed down like an heirloom. And now, you're doing the same. Your son doesn't play with wooden swords. He doesn't chase chickens through muddy fields. He doesn't know what a lazy morning is. Instead, he fetches coal. He pumps the bellows. He holds red-hot tongs with trembling fingers. And you whisper behind clenched teeth. Don't flinch. He's maybe 7. Already smells like scorched wool and wet burlap. Already has soot on his cheeks that won't wash off. You feel guilty. A little. But only a little. Because this isn't cruelty. This is survival. This is preparation. You see the way he watches you swing the hammer. Eyes wide, pardal-pied fear. You remember that look. You wore it once. Back when your father felt 10 feet tall. And carved from smoke and thunder. Now you know the truth. He wasn't a mountain. Just a tired man standing between fire and obligation. And you're the same. You teach the boy everything. How to judge heat by the color. How to tap, not slam. How to listen to the metal. You shout. More than you mean to. Hold it right. That's too cold. Don't cry. It's only a burn. Sometimes you soften. A story by the fire. A scrap of dried food you saved from last market day. But tenderness doesn't last long in the forge. It gets buried beneath noise and work and heat. He learns quickly. Too quickly. His hands are already roughening. His voice hasn't cracked. But his shoulders already sag with understanding. He'll outgrow his tunic before spring. But he'll never outgrow the burn marks. One day, sooner than either of you expects, he'll be the one swinging the hammer, while you sit and cough quietly in the corner, pretending not to wince at the sound of your own bones. He'll carry the weight you carried. He'll dream in sparks, wait to the ache of work, and forget what silence feels like. And you'll be proud, quietly, silently, in the same way your father was, without words. Because the forge doesn't teach language. It teaches legacy. People will say, it's unfair, that the cycle should end, that no child should be born into blister and smoke. But the world doesn't care. The gates still break. The plows still bend. And someone has to keep the fire going. You're not just passing down a trade. You're passing down a rhythm. A heartbeat made of hammer strikes. A purpose forged in repetition. And someday, when your hands can no longer hold the hammer, he will. Because that's how it's always been. A lineage of soot. Of skies. Of survival. Coming up in part 14. When the body breaks before the man, fading into the fire. You always knew it would happen. You just didn't know when. The forge doesn't make promises. It makes swear. One morning, you reach for the hammer. And it feels heavier. Not because it changed, but because you did. Your grip's still there. Mostly. But your shoulder clicks louder now. The ache doesn't fade between shifts. It just lingers. Like smoke in your lungs. Permanent. Patient. Your back refuses to straighten like it used to. You lean more. Sit more. Not because you're lazy, but because standing feels like holding up a collapsing barn with your ribs. Your knees whisper curses every time you crouch. And your fingers, they tremble. Not always. Just enough. Enough to spill nails. Enough to misjudge a swing. Enough to make you hesitate. And hesitation is dangerous here. The forge has no sympathy for hesitation. You drop a tool once. Just once. And your son is already there. Picking it up. Silently. Like he's been waiting. And you feel it. The shift. The beginning of the handover. Not official. Not spoken. But real. You start giving him the easier tasks. Then the harder ones. And then all of them. You still sit by the fire. Still watch. Still correct. Still mutter under your breath when he forgets to check the temperature before the quench. But it's his forge now. Even if your name still hangs on the sign. Even if the tools still remember your grip better than his. The villagers notice. A few nod respectfully when they pass. Most go straight to your son. And that's fine. You tell yourself it's fine. Because this is how it goes. This is the cycle. And you were never meant to be the flame forever. Just the spark. You still cough in the mornings. Worse now. Sometimes you taste iron when you breathe. Not the poetic kind. The blood kind. Your dreams have changed. They used to be filled with hammer strikes. Now they're filled with silence. And that silence feels heavier than any anvil you ever lifted. One day, your son asks you something simple, something you should know. And you pause. Because the answer, for the first time in decades, doesn't come right away. He sees it. He doesn't say anything. He just waits. Gently. Patiently. Like you once did. And in that quiet moment, you realize your mind is starting to rust. Not fast, but real. You won't see 50. Most blacksmiths don't. The lungs go first. Or the heart. Or the hands give out. And take the rest of the body with them. But that's not the part that scares you. What scares you is the day the fire doesn't miss you. When it burns just as hot. When the anvil rings just as loud. When the village gates still swing. The wheels still turn. And no one needs to ask where you are. You fade from the forge. Not with a bang. But with a breath. The same way you arrived. Unnoticed. Necessary. And slowly. You stop. Coming up in part 15. The echo after you, a legacy of sparks. You won't get a statue. There won't be songs sung in your name. No tales of glory. No gilded tomb. Just a wooden marker in the ground. And maybe a hammer hung above the hearth. If anyone remembers to dust it. But that's not the point, is it? Because your legacy doesn't stand tall. It swings. It creaks. It holds things together. Your legacy is the gate that still opens after 10 winters. The sword that didn't break in battle. The will that made it to market and back again, twice. You won't be remembered with flourishes. But you'll be used. Relied on. Quietly. Daily. The nails you forge hold up the church rafters. The hinges you shape let the barn doors close against the wind. The tools you repaired still dig, still chop, still carve. And every time someone leans on something you once mended, you're there. Not seen, but heard. An echo in the creak. A whisper in the click of latch on metal. Your son swings the hammer now. And sometimes, if you close your eyes and listen, you can hear yourself in him. In the pause before a strike. In the way he hums when the fire is just right. In the muttered curse when the tongues pinch wrong. Just like they always did. He thinks he's doing it alone. But he's not. You're still there. In every muscle he builds. In every habit he doesn't remember learning. In the way he never complains. At least, not where anyone can hear. And someday, his son will be at the bellows. Squinting through smoke. Trying not to flinch. And the cycle will begin again. Not because anyone forced it. But because something must keep the fire going. The forge doesn't care who swings the hammer. It only needs hands. Strong ones. Calloused ones. Willing ones. But the fire remembers you. In the rhythm of the bellows. In the hiss of the quench. In the heartbeat of hot iron. And long after your name fades from memory. Long after your bones return to the earth. The tools remain. Not shiny. Not perfect. But still working. Still needed. Because you were never the story. You were the spark. The silent ember. The one who kept the world from falling apart. One nail. One blade. One breath at a time. Coming up in part 16. The fire never dies. Why, you were always more than just a blacksmith. They called you a blacksmith. A man who made tools, who fixed things, who lived in smoke and steel. That's all they saw. But you were more. You were rhythm. You were memory. You were the reason 100 small things worked without anyone stopping to wonder why. You didn't preach. You didn't rule. You didn't lead. But you built. You shaped the things they used. You mended what they broke. You gave form to function, weight to intention. You didn't ask for thanks. You didn't need it. Because deep down, you knew. Your hands made the world turn, while others took credit for the spinning. You weren't just a man with a hammer. You were a bridge between needs and solutions, between wood and iron, between fire and purpose. They saw the smoke and turned away. But you walked through it every day. And in doing so, you burned quietly into history. Not with banners, but with usefulness. Not with speeches, but with hinges that don't squeak. And gates that still close. And swords that still cut. The forge still burns. Even after you've gone. Even after the cough becomes quiet. Even after your grip forgets what it once held. Because fire doesn't die. It moves. It changes hands. And your hands, though twisted, bruised, long since still, once held it, tended it, fed it, passed it on. You were never just a blacksmith. You were a keeper of heat, a shaper of need, a quiet guardian of what holds everything together. And long after your name has faded, the work remains. Somewhere, a child swings a door open. Somewhere, a knight sharpens a blade. Somewhere, a bell rings across a quiet village. And somewhere in the sound, the rhythm, the usefulness, you are still there. Not in fire, not in steel, but in the silence that follows when something works exactly as it should. That, more than anything, is legacy. They buried you simply. No songs, no bells, just a pine box, a wooden marker, and a few quiet nods from people who owed you more than they ever said. There was no ceremony, no long eulogies, just silence. The kind that feels heady, the kind that listens. Your son swung the hammer that day, not for iron, not for work, but to seal the lid on your casket. It rang out once, sharp and clear, like punctuation at the end of a very long sentence. The village moved on, as it always does. Doors still needed hinges. Carts still broke their wheels. The forge still needed tending. And so, your son kept it burning, day after day, swing after swing. And still, they came, with their bent nails and broken blades, with their, could you just, and, it won't take long. They didn't talk about you much. People rarely talk about what they depended on, but sometimes, someone would pick up a tool you once shaped, feel the balance, the weight, and say, almost obscenely, still good, this one. And in that moment, you were there. In the hand that held the hammer. In the iron that didn't bend. In the silence that followed when the job was done right. Because that's the secret. You were never meant to be remembered with statues or plaques. You were meant to echo. In the clang of steel. In the hiss of quenching water. In the creak of a working hinge on a cold morning. Your legacy isn't carved in stone. It's worn into the handles of tools. It's stitched into the burn marks on leather aprons. It's breathed in with every breath of smoke by the next in line. You are not gone. You are rhythm, repetition, endurance. You are the sound of something being made well. being made to last. So when the forge roars, when the hammer falls, when the bellows sigh, they're not just noises, they're reminders of you, still working, long after your hands let go. Coming up in part 18. One nail at a time, how you held the world together. You never set out to change the world. You just made nails. Thousands of them. Straight ones, bent ones, short ones, lol. Some for gates. Some for coffins. Some for the floorboards of a chapel where people prayed for peace. While you hammered through another midnight, you made hinges that never squeaked. Latches that never failed. Plows that cut deeper than expected. Not because of magic, but because you got the angle right. Because you paid attention when no one else was looking. And that was the whole point, wasn't it? The small things. Done right. Over and over again. No one praised the nails. They praised the doors. The barns that stood through storms. The bridges that didn't fall. But you knew. You always knew. That everything strong, everything that lasted, was held together by pieces no one ever saw. Your life was a series of those pieces. Quiet choices. Steady hands. Sweat-soaked days spent giving shape to the future. Even if your name was never carved into it. And still, you showed up. In heat. In hunger. In silence. You showed up. Because if you didn't, the world loosened. Bit by bit. The latch stuck. The gate sagged. The wagon groaned under weight it once carried easily. You weren't the architect. You weren't the noble with blueprints, or the priest with blessings. But you were the reason their plans didn't fall apart on the second day. You didn't write history. You fastened it. And maybe that's enough. Because when the world turns its back on the ones who made it turn, it still walks on roads they paved, rests beneath roofs they reinforce, leans on tools shaped by hands no one bothered to think. But history isn't always written in ink. Sometimes it's hammered into shape. One horseshoe, one blade, one nail at a time. And you were the one who swung the hammer. Coming up in part 19. The things you built still stand. The quiet immortality of useful work. They don't speak your name. Not in the town square. Not in the church ledgers. Not even in stories passed down over warm hearths. But the things you built, they're still here. The barn door still closes with the click. The kite still rolls without a wobble. The gate still holds steady against the wind. No one thinks to ask who made them. And maybe that's the greatest compliment. Because things that work tend to disappear into the background. Just like you did. There's a sword hung above a mantle. Its edge still true. The initials on the hilt worn smooth by time and touch. No one knows who forged it. But every time someone passes, they stop. They look. They admire. You are there, in the balance of that blade. There's a horseshoe, bent just right. Still nailed to the same beam it's clung to for 40 winters. They say it's for luck. But really, it's because no one's ever had a reason to replace it. You are there, in the curve of that iron. There's a lock on a cellar door that clicks shut with a satisfying finality. Made before anyone alive now can remember. No rust. No give. Still working. Still doing what it was made to do. You are there, in the silence of that mechanism. Time wore you down. But your work, your usefulness, endures. Because while others built monuments to themselves, you built things for use. For holding. For protecting. For carrying the burden of someone else's day. And that's its own kind of immortality. Not flashy. Not gilded. but reliable, respected, real. They may never carve your story in stone, but they will keep opening the door as you hum, riding the wagons you mended, and walking across the floorboards you fastened by hand. The world moves on, but it does so on the strength of things you left behind. Coming up in part 20. The flame still burns. You were never just a man with a hammer. Long after your hands have gone still. Long after the last spark leaps from the anvil and fades into the dusk. The flame still burns. Not the one in the forge, though that too may glow with your son's breath, your grandson's sweat. No, the fire that matters more is quieter, older, deeper. It's the fire you carried inside, the one no wind could blow out, the one you fed with repetition, with discipline, with unspoken pride. You see, you were never just a man with a hammer. You were rhythm. You were memory. You were the heartbeat of a village that never knew how much it leaned on you. You were the warmth behind the iron, the reason doors closed, the reason wheels turned, the reason swords held fast and didn't snap when they mattered most. You weren't a hero, but you were what heroes needed. You made the tools they carried. You repaired the armor they wore. You gave weight to their cause, even if they never learned your name. And when the world called for something to be fixed, you answered, not with speeches, not with promises, but with sparks, with hands that hurt, with lungs that burned, with eyes that squinted through smoke, and still saw what needed doing. So if they ever say, he was just a blacksmith, let them not know. Let them never understand how many lives were held together by the quiet strength of a man who chose usefulness over glory. Because in a world of noise, your silence was your anthem. And in a world full of things made to break, you made things that lasted. The forge may change hands. The tools may wear. Even your name may fade with the seasons. But somewhere, a hinge swings. A wheel turns, a gate closes, and someone, stays warm because of you. That's the legacy. That's the fire. It still burns. If this journey meant something to you, if somewhere between the sparks and the silence, you felt seen, or simply stayed a little longer than you meant to, then I invite you to stay a little more. Subscribe. Not just to the channel, but to the kind of stories that don't need to shout to be heard. Leave a like, not because it helps me, though it does, but because it tells the world you believe in quiet things built to last. Share this with someone who carries more than they let on, someone who works in the background, someone who, like the blacksmith, has always held the world together, one unthink moment at a time. And if you have a thought, a story, a memory, drop it in the comments. I read them all, like echoes from old forges. Your words matter more than you know. Thank you for being here. And until next time, may the firing you never go out.